God, Val, you're not going to believe what he has over his left shoulder as a part of the intro. Oh, this is going to be phenomenal. Oh, God, I can't wait for the first question, Val. Val, you ready?
Yes.
Let's hit it. Hootie Hoot Productions presents the Sports Deli Podcast, where everyone deserves a seat at the table. We're so honored to welcome our 18th WNBA player or coach and our 27th overall professional women's basketball player or coach, the pride of 45744, better known as Lowell, Ohio, on National Bobblehead Day, Coach Dan Hughes. In case you didn't know, Lowell, Ohio has a population of less than 600 and is closer to the West Virginia state line than any major city in Ohio. Coach Hughes has more than 40 years of coaching experience at the collegiate and professional levels, but like so many other legendary coaches like Lute Olson, Jim Calhoun, Dick Vitale, Jim Herrick, Roy Williams, Red Auerbach, Vince Lombardi, and the Wizard of Westwood, John Wooden, Coach Hughes got his start at the high school level before making the jump to the college and professional ranks more than 20 years later. He won 2 WNBA championships with the Seattle Storm, one of them in the Wubble in 2020 that had far more relevance off the court than it did on. Coach Hughes was a part of the coaching staff with Team USA women's basketball, which recently won the gold in Tokyo, which he and Sue Bird shared a special moment, and has been part of USA basketball for nearly 15 years. But it was about 15 years ago in 2008 that he made a decision as a white ally that changed the course of one man's life that he barely knew, and today you will hear the rest of the story. He shares a birthday with Cynthia Cooper, Pete Rose, Greg Maddux, Baker Mayfield, and was born the same year as Bruce Willis, Kevin Costner, Whoopi Goldberg, Jeff Daniels, who's from Detroit, by the way, Kelsey Grammer, and John Grisham. He loves empowering people. He believes he has several homes. He's coached both men and women. He coached players like Sue Bird, Breanna Stewart, Chastity Melvin, who was on the show, Adia Barnes, Vicki Johnson, current head coach with the Dallas Wings in the WNBA, Edward Lawson Wade, Coach Wade's wife, and Becky Hammond, now the head coach for the Las Vegas Aces. And you can find him on LinkedIn as the Basketball Lifer. He's been a broadcaster and loves to give back and empower people, especially women, to greater heights. Coach Val Whiting, All-American at Stanford, former ABL and WNBA star, and she's my co-host today, welcome you to the Sports Deli, where everyone deserves a seat at the table. We're truly humbled and honored that you're joining us today.
Thank you. My pleasure. I know Val well. Yeah.
Yeah, Val's great. She's been an amazing addition when she comes in and guest co-hosts with me. She's just an amazing person and adds so much value to the show. Okay, so see, this is where I was talking earlier about what's over your left shoulder. And so my first question to you is, on National Bobblehead Day, do you have a Dan Hughes bobblehead doll?
I do not. That's okay.
We got to get a Dan Hughes bobblehead doll, Val.
I'll tell you what, let's talk about the bobbleheads I do have, though. I got a Sue Bird, I got a Jewel Lloyd, I got a Breanna Stewart, I got a Becky Hammond, I got a Pat Summitt. Pat Summitt's down there.
Wow.
I've got, but I'm a music guy. I have an Alice Cooper, and I have an Eddie Money. God bless, God bless Eddie Money. We lost him a couple years ago.
Yes.
So I got all kinds of bobbleheads back there. A lot of baseball too. So there you go. But no, I don't have one. That's okay though.
Man, Val, can you believe that on National Bobblehead Day, we're talking about bobbleheads with
I know.
Coach Dan Hughes? That is phenomenal.
I was wondering what your grandchildren think of your bobbleheads.
They love it. I have shared, like I have bobbleheads from when I coached in Cleveland and when I coached in San Antonio, and of the mascots, and they now have their own bobblehead collection started.
Oh, that is so outstanding. We have never started a show like that, and we probably never will. That was just amazing. How's all your travels and you're busier after you retired, Coach?
Yeah. How about that? Isn't that how it goes?
That's amazing. I love it.
Where are you?
I'm in Ohio.
Oh, where you from? Okay, you went back
Yeah.
home.
My grandkids live about 2 miles from us.
That's
My daughter's here, and I am now the assistant coach of the first grade basketball team she's coaching. That's my new job now.
What a treat.
I got team pictures tonight too, man.
Oh.
She told me what my daughter told me what to wear. So.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Oh man. So, Coach, we've had a lot of people on the show talk about their upbringing, and I don't think anyone, actually, that's not true. Crystal Robinson is from Atoka, Oklahoma, a town of 400. So she's got you beat there.
Yeah.
But you come from a small town. When Jay Billis came on, he talked about how he had a terrible experience with his high school coach. And his wife pointed out during one of their reunions that he probably, in all seriousness, needed some therapy because they were all scarred from that experience. I didn't have a great experience either. I got cut 3 times growing up, but it made me more resilient. And, back in the day, it was obviously different for all of us in a lot of ways. But I know you've shared this before with people, but you said you were really naive growing up in Lowell before you went to Muskegon. Can you tell everyone why that is?
Well, you grow up in a small community that used to be different. I mean, when I was in the 2nd grade, I was on my bike and I was at the playground, or I was over on what they call the island where they played baseball. And I was a little guy allowed to just roam around and do things. I mean, that's not the way things are now. I can't imagine having, I raised kids and can't imagine doing that, but it was a different time, and I grew up in a situation where I was the first to go to college in my immediate family. So I had no idea what college was like. I thought it was this big mountain that I had to go over. And I quite honestly wasn't sure I was smart enough. That's never been one of the things that I just was terribly confident about. So I was naive to an awful lot of things. Now, what helped me a lot was that the community, a lot of those small communities, especially where I come from, they kind of take care of you. I had a good mother and father, but as I roamed around town and I roamed around the places that I went, there were good people around me that kind of looked out for me and, spoke to, and they never quelched my dreams. They never said, no, you can't do those things, and they could have, because a small town guy growing up, having the aspirations to be what I wanted to be, may not, a lot of people could say, no, don't do that, but that's kind of my background. But I was naive, and when I got to college, it was a hit on the face, where I was afraid I was going to flunk biology. And I remember the feeling, I thought, oh my gosh, what if I flunk out and have to go back home? And all these people that had supported me now, see me as, a guy that can't cut it. But I was naive, but I also think that I was fortunate to be around good people who allowed me to dream, even though I was naive.
This may sound like an obvious question, but when you say they could have squelched your dreams, did you want to be a coach way back then?
Yeah.
Wow.
1962, my parents, and again, I'm from a small town, and our high school team boys went to the state tournament. And my parents took me to all the games. I followed that team at 7. And it was odd. Obviously I knew all the players, and most kids are thinking, well, they want to be a player, and I did too.
That's what I was thinking.
But no, it was the coach.
Wow.
It was the coach, and I ended up playing for that same coach in high school.
Unreal.
But that's something clicked, and so I'm like, I've been on that track since then, and I come from a business family. I come from people who own restaurants and furniture stores and things like that. Not educators, not coaches. So they could have easily said, no, you need to take over the furniture store. But they didn't. They let me be who I was.
That's amazing. And how was it being so close to Indiana, such a basketball crazed state?
Well, I've been in Indiana, and I had two stories. One, West Virginia is important to give credit to because I grew up following Jerry West.
Absolutely.
I grew up, we got 3 TV channels when I was a kid. 3.
Yep.
I can't imagine that now. I go through 3 every 5 minutes. But
ABC, CBS, and NBC. That's it.
That was it. But one of those stations was out of Huntington, West Virginia. That's where Marshall University is. And I grew up watching, the D'Antonio brothers, who you went on to be a great coach, Russell Lee, a whole bunch of Hal Greer was a huge impact on me. But what really impacted me was a West Virginia player named Jerry West. And one time I was working with someone who had been with Memphis. He used to be a consultant with Memphis. And one of my proudest moments was when this person that was talking to me, I said, Jerry West is my idol. And she goes, well, I worked with Jerry West. And matter of fact, we talked about you. I go, you talked about me? Me? With Jerry West? And I've never had the pleasure to meet Jerry West, but that just blew me away that somehow Jerry West knew who I was, because he was, I read his books. I got him on TV, which was hard to get basketball games back then, but he was a huge influence on me.
Wow, I gotta let that breathe for a minute. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Legendary in so many ways. The logo of the NBA, a Hall of Famer, and as an executive.
Yeah.
You talk about somebody who just has it.
Yeah.
He has it. Val, did you want to jump in? Go ahead.
Well, I was wondering, so now present day, you still haven't had a chance to meet Jerry West?
I was thinking the same thing.
Oh, isn't that a shame? And I saw him once. I was in Lexington, Kentucky at a Final Four. And I'm usually pretty respectful of people in situations. I'm not, I've been fortunate to be around a lot of different people that I really admire, but I won't bother them unless it's kind of the moment. And I should have made it the moment, but I didn't. He was kind of, we were at the arena there, and it was a social gathering at a Final Four. And I think he was over maybe getting a drink or so. I don't know what he was doing, for example. And I chose not to bother him, but I probably regret that. I probably should have bowed my neck and gone over and said hello. But no, I've never met Jerry West, even though I am quite aware of a lot I've read all his books. I've listened to him, and maybe someday that'd be a nice meeting.
Yeah, it would be. Well, he knows who you are.
Yeah, that blew me away when she said, well, we've talked. I used to talk with him almost daily, and we talked about you and your team. And I'm like, oh my land, how cool is that? That honestly, and I know it's maybe she was just making me feel good, but it did. No doubt it did.
Yeah, that's I can't imagine as a kid just hearing those words.
Yeah.
Jerry West knows who you are. That is, wow, that's mind blowing. So you grew up at a really tumultuous time. And when Jim Herrick was on the show, he talked about how, speaking of West Virginia, how he in West Virginia would go into the black neighborhoods once or twice a week, and the black and brown kids would come into the white area. It's not like parents and the community knew about it, because if they did, who knows what would have happened to some of the kids in the black and brown community back then. And so, I don't know if that's necessarily something that you experienced, but there was 3 assassinations in the 60s. And so how did that affect you? Just all of that in the civil rights era, the first civil rights era.
What affected me mostly because it was such a, and I think, I don't know the exact word you said, but the generation gap was fairly large, between somebody growing up in that time and the world, the kind of the perception of the world. And it made me nervous, just to be honest with you. I love my mom and dad, but there were times we didn't necessarily be on the same page. And when those events would happen, whether it was Kent State, whether it was all the assassinations, of which it still blows my mind, when I look back and think of all those events that happened and how that changed the course of history. Like, I remember exactly where I was when John Kennedy was shot. I remember exactly where I was when Robert Kennedy was shot. I remember exactly where I was when Martin Luther King was shot. Now, this is a little, town I'm growing up in, and not a lot of national exposure.
You're a teenager.
For some reason, I remember exactly where I was when those things happened, and I can give you details about that day. All of them, every one of them stood out. But I just was hopeful that the world would calm down and that the generations would not be so far apart. But it took a while to move to a place where I didn't feel like quite as uneasy as I felt in those late 60s and early 70s years.
So you clearly had a level of thoughtfulness in terms of diversity and inclusion at a young age. We don't always necessarily know the difference between nature versus nurture and why those things happen. It's just something that's part of our DNA sometimes. Some of it's learned. Maybe when you went to Muskegum, that was part of it, and just life experiences, things that are experiential, allow us to be who we are. And most recently, we had the racial reckoning, which we'll talk about later. But do you think that that decade, the 60s, helped you be the kind of coach that, as we talked about with Jerry West, also has it? Because you have it, Coach.
Well, thank you. But, there's no question. It's funny how life kind of goes in circles in some places, but I think the time period that we are going through now had, to me, a lot of similarities to the years I was growing up in, and I was fortunate. My mom and dad were very respectful to all people, very respectful to women, very respectful to people, whether you had money or not. I mean, that was never a barometer with my family. And I think I learned very quickly the judge of a person had to do with kind of what's inside him, as opposed to all the other things, and my father would help people. And my grandfather wasn't. I was lucky. I had good parents. I was lucky that I saw them help people, and it was never a thought like, well, I'm doing this because this person has money or this person has power. It wasn't about that. It wasn't about that. And I was raised by women that were strong and that were a huge part, of growing up. And it's the same thing that I hope I did with my kids was, respect's an important thing. And I think it starts with you giving it, especially if you want to get respect back, and so I was fortunate, to be raised in a family that I think I saw actions greater than words, and I was formed by that.
Oh man, I love listening about the early days of phenomenal leaders, because it's not something that you can just be lucky doing for 40 plus years. It's just not how it works. You can get lucky one year, but it just doesn't happen that way. And so I'm just curious, you said later in your career in the WNBA that some players really took to your style, and you think that's a big reason why you had a lot of success in the WNBA. And I'm just wondering, I remember as a young coach, I had an incident my first year as a grad assistant, and this is my 30th year coaching. And a player tested me, and I told him to get on the line, and he was like, I'm not doing it. And I went to the head coach and I just said, I'm trying to discipline this young man and he's not listening. And he backed me and supported me and said, if you don't get on the line, you're off the team. And I'm just wondering, in your early days, how was it as an assistant? Did your coach, because my best friend coaches at Kansas State. And when you hire somebody, you know this better than anybody. And I have a point to all this. You don't really know what you're getting in a coach. People advocate for you, and you have a resume, but until you get to know someone, you don't really know what their assets are and what their skill set is as a coach. And did your first coaches ever come to you in high school and your first stints in college and say, you're more than I ever bargained for. You've added so much value to this program that I never anticipated. And, maybe it was the best hire I've ever made, or they just said some things to you that reinforced the path that you were going down as being such a good human.
Yeah. I don't know if they used those exact words, but there was a comfort level that I felt with people, and several people made me feel wanted, and there's all kinds of ways you can make people feel. They gave me space to be me, and nobody really tried to change me a lot, in regard to things. They were inclusive with me. And sometimes, actions to me are just so greater than words. And I think all of us, and Val can speak to this probably. You watch what a coach does probably with more razor focus than you do what they say to you. I can say all the right things, but if I don't do the right things or what have you, that has a greater impact. And that's what I saw. People made me feel comfortable where I was. They gave me a home feeling about it. I was around some outstanding people. Not everybody. Let's be serious. If you're in a long career, there's going to be times you're around some people who your culture doesn't mix their culture, but by and large, mine was allowed to grow. And it didn't come easy to me. People sometimes, I'm older now. I'm way beyond the early years, but the early years were not easy for me. I didn't get opportunities. I understand what it is to want something and then you're not seeing that happen, and you're having to realize sometimes later is greater. But when you're going through it, you don't think like that. When you're going through it, you want it to happen now. And you look around you and it's happening for other people, but it's not happening for you. Well, luckily, I got good advice. I remember one person told me, I'm trying to climb the ladder to where it was going to take me. And the person said, listen, maybe the best thing you can do is enjoy where you are. And I swear that's the same thing when people come to me now. I said, the best calling card you can have is to be really successful where you are. That will probably do more for you than you networking 24 hours a day.
Such a hard thing too, because you've known you wanted to coach for so long. Then you're in high school for 20 years. Like you said, seeing all these people maybe make the jump. And so then you make the jump and you stay in state. And, Val's going to follow up with another question, because I think it's a phenomenal question, because I coached 15 years on the men's side and I'm on my 15th year now on the women's side. And so those two experiences, especially now, the one that I'm at a low income first generation high school after 23 years at the college level, has been the best job I have ever had, to your point, that I have made it the best job that I've ever had because I poured into it in a way that I've never poured into a job. Because whatever's next is just going to happen. Just make where you're at phenomenal. And so they've taught me more about being a dad and being a coach and being a person than these kids have more struggles. And if I ever get back to the college level, I'll definitely be a better coach. And so do you want to touch briefly on your experience, on the men's side, and then Val's going to follow up with you with the next question.
Yeah, what's an interesting, my life, I started as a high school coach I got my master's in 1978, had a great experience helping out with the men's team at Miami University. But then I immediately became a head high school coach at 22. I think I was the youngest coach in the state of Ohio. Now that was 1978, and I had a good experience. Now we have full circle a year or so ago, moved back to that same area community. And for example, we had a little Christmas party. I had 5 of those members of that team come to our little Christmas party that we had with our family and stuff. And I've re-entered their life.
Wow.
Physically, we kept track, but those young men, I was only 5 or 6 years older than them. So I'm 66, right, but they're about 60 now. And I'm back in their life, and I've watched them go through all the things we go through in life. I told them, I wish I had the time or the ability. I'm not a great writer, but it would be a great story to have talked about that year and then seen where each of those young men's life took them, because it's all over the board. I mean, you have people that have done some incredible things. You've had some people that have had some incredible heartache, just like you do any group, any team. Wow. But I kind of gone full circle with that. And the men's part was, I didn't get out of men's because I necessarily was struggling or not doing that. I felt a calling to be a head coach, which I went through a lot of years being an assistant. I mean, a lot of years. And the women's side afforded me that. But the other thing, I just felt it worked. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you make decisions, because quite honestly, I could have, the year I went into women's basketball, I ultimately was offered a job at Valparaiso with a guy named Homer Drew, who was a great coach. And I would have coached Bryce Drew, who
one of the most famous shots in NCAA history.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, my son's named after Bryce Drew.
Wow.
I mean, we had that kind of relationship, but it felt right to go on the women's side. And I was just I did a broadcast of Iowa State and Oklahoma a couple of days ago. Mm-hmm. Iowa State, there's a coach there called Bill Finley, and the assistant coach is Jody Steyer, is her name. And she was the coach who walked down to my office. There was a coaching change. I was on the men's side, and the gentleman I was working for was becoming an athletic director. And so the coaching change, and she looked at me and said, well, I'm leaving to go to Iowa State. Why don't you take my job? Why don't you go over on the women's side and try it? Because I think you'd be great. And that's honestly how it all kind of happened.
Wow.
And it was the best thing that could have happened to me.
Wow, that's an amazing story. I know I was supposed to ask about how you transitioned, but I wanted to go back to what you were talking about, having a coach, and a coach being a person of action more than just words. And having played against you as a coach, you're always a coach I wanted to play for. You just seem like a kind person. That's the vibe I always got from you from the sideline, that you really cared. And Mike, you don't know this, but the only fight I ever got into was actually in Cleveland. You remember that, Coach Hughes?
Yeah,
I do. I don't know what came over me. The teammate I was protecting, I didn't even like her, but I just lost it. I didn't even connect. I lost so much money. I lost like 10% of my salary. I was only making $30,000. They fined me $3,000. So yeah, I almost forgot about that. It was in Cleveland.
No, that's interesting. You raise that point, and it's interesting. Every year you kind of go through it, and our paths never crossed where I got to coach you, but it would have been a good mix. I just, first of all, I've had incredible success with Stanford players, and I've had very great success with very cerebral type of players, of which you were. You know, you look back at some of the people that kept me in coaching, it was because I think in a lot of cases I believed in people, much like you know, and I gave them some space, you know, to kind of be who they were. And some coaches, that's harder than others. You know, I'm sure I had my good and bad points, but I think one of the things that I really learned as I went through this was to trust in players, you know, to build a trust in players and to let them lead. I think leadership is so important, but I think it is the most impactful when it's coming from a player to a player. To me, that's my job isn't to be a leader, although I need to be a leader, but my job is to develop leaders as a coach. I've always felt that, and I really evolved to that point where, you know, by the end of my career, I didn't talk nearly as much as I did at the beginning, but I did try to empower leadership in my team in different ways, you know, and some of that was fortunate because I had people I could trust, you know, I took jobs near the end that, you know, I went into those jobs knowing that I had people of that culture, you know, or I had enough power to draft people that, you know, that kind of fit that mold, you know, that were like that. But I'm really fortunate, you know. I probably have coached. I would put my arsenal of players I've coached at the point position with anybody, men or women. I probably coached the greatest point guards in the history of women's basketball. Nobody's coached Dawn Staley, Sue Bird, Becky Hammond, Jennifer Rosati, Helen Darling, Susie McConnell Syria. How about that one? Val remember her.
Yeah.
You know, and Jordan Canada, so on and so on. I mean, God has blessed me with people that really were exceptional, not only from a performance standpoint, they were exceptional minds. And I remember Bill VanDerveer one time came to me, wanted to trade for Becky Hammond, for example. And I'm like, Bill, I can't do that. He goes, well, why can't you do that? He goes, well, who's going to coach my team? You know?
Bill probably had a good round of golf before he asked that question.
Yeah, I wasn't going to trade any of those players.
Oh man, that's amazing. Oh wow. Val, do you have a follow-up question?
No, I was going to apologize for the fight because that's the last time you coached against me.
Don't give it a second thought, Val. Don't give it a second thought. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to coach you because I think we would have had some good moments together.
I agree. I wish you probably don't know that I struggled a lot with my mental health during my WNBA career, so it was cut short. So I didn't get a chance to really see out how long I could have played at that level.
Let's go down that path because I think it's a good pivot. And then we'll circle back to a couple of different things that I wanted to ask you about in terms of the wobble and advocacy and those types of things. But, you know, Val, Meta, Stanford Artest, you know, DeMar DeRozan. There's other people in the news from the NFL and, you know, Liz Cambage. You know, there's a lot of people that have come out, and there are strength in numbers now in a way that we've never seen in terms of not just people, but social media. And so it seems like, Coach, you've always been at the forefront of this kind of thing in terms of treating people holistically and not just saying shut up and dribble, or in Val's case, shut up and post up. And, you know, is that something that you always found frustrating, that other people were just coaching and not taking the whole person into consideration? And you always took things a step further and you cared about them in a way that maybe others didn't?
You know, you raise a good question. I am very happy that that the landscape of the world of coaching kind of kept swinging towards things that I kind of saw as important. I never felt, I was coached and I studied coaches that were much different than me, methodology wise. And I was able to pull maybe some of the things they did that were useful to me, but I never tried to be them. I never felt like I had to be, I never thought to myself, what would so-and-so do here? I never felt like I had to be somebody else. And I think that was given to me as a child,
right,
just by being accepted. And that's an important thing, because the world of coaching and how we do things actually has moved more towards the way I was doing things years ago. I don't know as I really changed all that much. Even going from men to women, I didn't change that much. I was always kind of comfortable in looking at things this way. But I am glad that we do a better job of coaching the whole person and not just the talent on the court. And I'd like to think the world's moving that way. We'll see. I hope so. In regard to it, because and I learned some things. I made some mistakes along the way. I was driven to be successful, and there's a couple times that I look back and say, well, I wish I would have had the knowledge that I had 20 years ago, way back then. But by and large, I still was in the same area I've always been in, and I felt comfortable in that area, and didn't, even though other people were doing things a lot different maybe than I was, especially 30 years ago. I never felt the need to change. I never felt like, well, I'm not going to be successful. And people would say, well, you're not this, you're not that. And I heard those things. But still, I think God gave me enough presence to say, you know what, just be you. Be you, understand what's really important, and that's players. That's what's really important.
And the culture on the men's side was different when you first started.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably why you resonated maybe even more and later in your career, especially on the women's side, because of, that holistic approach. And, that's something that's resonated with me more as I get later in my career as well. On the women's side, it's just something that feels right. Val, go ahead.
Have you ever had a player on your team deal with a mental illness?
Yes. To be honest with you, I don't know if we categorized it that, but sitting here and realizing what we were going through, I'm sure that that's probably under that category, for example. But I think I've always been kind of built to not just say, well, you got to be tougher. I don't know as I was built that way. I don't think I've ever been quite like that. I think there was always thought to helping keep a person and player on balance in their lives. Now, I didn't jump into their lives. I was not somebody that the first time they didn't play well, I ran to them and tried to seek out what's going on. But I think they felt comfortable enough to talk to me, or they respected the fact that I probably kept it to basketball, and if they're not playing well, okay, well, we worked on basketball things to help them play better, in regard to it. But they had to build, and I really studied learning. About how people learn. And I usually had good relationships with people around them. I had some of the best relationships with mothers on the men's side of people I coached. And that's a pretty powerful thing. There were a lot of men that I coached whose mothers were the central figure in their lives. And I think the mothers always felt comfortable with me, and I with them. We didn't have talks about playing time. We had context about, and we had moments about Sam or about Archie or about, the players, about them as people, about them as students, about them as family, and I think that also served well as I look back, and I'm the same way. The relationships to me, I've had championships. I've had championships at almost every level, but the thing that I think about when I'm with my wife at night and we're watching a game on TV and it's fun because we know so many people and we're having a glass of wine, we're talking about the relationships.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about the 24 points and 18 rebounds they had. That's really not where it goes. We're talking more about the relationships that we shared, about their families back then or even now. That's the thing that you cherish as an older coach. And I was told that. I'm not the first to say that. I was told that, and I grew into a time to actually find out that was true.
Wow, that's powerful. So the thing that I thought about when you were talking about that was, as you mentioned earlier, one of your main jobs is to nurture and massage and create leaders. And I imagine some of the discussions you have with your wife also are how players evolve. And the WNBA has evolved in a way that maybe we've never seen any organization, to be quite honest with you. And they've always been at the forefront of advocacy.
Yeah.
And so you were a part of something that I think historically, not just in sports history, but in American history, will go down as something people will talk about in conversations in the corners of their homes, as well as history books, what happened in the Wubble. And that's why, as Val knows and others know that have listened to this show, why I wear the types of t-shirts that I wear and have given away 99% of my wardrobe. And pretty much this is all I wear because the WNBA, the women of WNBA have inspired me in a way that probably not many others have. Some people growing up that I admired. And what the power of a t-shirt did in the Wubble during the 2020 elections after the murder of George Floyd, and the collaboration and the decisions that were so impactful that went far beyond the hardwood, not only in the Georgia elections, but in forcing an owner who didn't deserve to be an owner of a WNBA franchise, where nearly 80% of the women are people of color, women of color. And so what were your thoughts about the leadership, and how proud were you to sort of take a back seat, but also they knew that you had their back?
Well, you talked earlier about growing up in the 60s, for example. And like what I saw was a group of young people, the WNBA, players of the WNBA, looking at the world and saying, it can be better than this. It can be better than this. And taking steps to try to just create a better world for us to live in than what we were seeing play out in regard to it. So, and that's an important statement, that the world can be better. And I think they went about figuring out, and it was them. It was very much a groundswell of players using that moment to search for a greater good, and knowing there can be a greater good than what they were seeing in life playing out. And that reminded, there were some seeds of that back in the 60s and early 70s too, but
I watched, I watched 144, but I just wanted to ask you, what are some things that maybe people don't know about what happened behind the scenes that you're able to talk about that because Kelsey Trainer came on. She's a WNBA advocate, friends with Jay Billis. She's a lawyer. She knows a lot of the players, and she knows some of the stories that happen behind the scenes with that T-shirt that a lot of people don't know. But what are some things that happened that you were like, wow, that was something that I never expected and changed the course of history?
Well, I think that immediately in your own kind of lane, so to speak, your team, for example. And back then I really had two teams. I was part of the Seattle Storm, but I was also part of USA Basketball.
Right.
At that point. And they started coming together in a way to have discussions, with each other. It started long before it kind of played out with players, but there were moments where, and a lot of them because of the situations we still find ourselves, there were Zoom meetings and things like that, but they came together to discuss, what can we do? And I think, a lot of people had this going on in their lives too. And behind the scenes, I think a lot of us were looking internally at ourselves and our families and saying, what can we do so that our children, so that our team, so that ourselves can learn about a greater good than what we're seeing right now. And I know I looked internally a lot. I had discussions, with my family. I had discussions with my team. I had discussions with my friends. I remember calling James Wade one time and just saying, I'm so proud of you, because he had gone through a tough situation.
On the airplane. Yep.
And I said to James, I said, as proud as I am of you as a coach, I'm proud of you as a man, in regard to. But I think we had those type of, I know in my life, I had a lot of those thoughts, and I had a lot of those moments that were probably personal and private to a degree, but they also were with people that we deal with regularly. And maybe that's the starting point that was going on. And then the players took it a whole nother step, I think, with their stage that they had.
Well, there's no doubt that you're an ally, and everybody knows that. And you just mentioned James Wade. That's a perfect segue into the next question I had. In terms of being an ally and how you notice leaders and build leaders, and it starts at the top. It always does. You were the general manager for a part of your career and the coach. And so what did you see in Coach Wade? Because he told this story that was not private, that was very public in the press conference. Probably told it before, but people were listening more during the press conference after they won the WNBA championship this past season. But what did you see in Coach Wade after coaching his wife, Edward Lawson Wade, that you thought that he would be a great coach, which clearly he is? His presence reminds me of you a lot, and he's just an even better person, like you said.
Well, the first step to me was, I was coaching Edwidge and knew and appreciated her, but I hadn't met James, but he initiated, through Edwidge. He said, when James is here to watch me play, he was playing then. He was a player, probably in Russia or certainly overseas. He was a player.
Right.
And he said, he loved to maybe have lunch with you and talk about coaching. I go, great. Well, the fact that she brought that to me, that impressed me, that he was thinking about what he was going to do after playing, because he was still a player then. And that impressed me, because I like players that, use their abilities in basketball to help their lives. It's not just about basketball. It's about using this God-given skill they got and craft they have to make their life better. And so when James did that to me, I thought, I like that. I like that. So we had several lunches. I can remember going out several times. We'd be playing in Washington for some reason. That one sticks in my head. And he would, you know, we'd arrange and started to eat. And then eventually it led to me saying to him, you know, when you get done playing, come see me. Because San Antonio was great. San Antonio was, you know, we watched our money, but they always said to me, if you see somebody who's really going to be a good coach, we'll help you figure out a way to get them started. And there's a lot of people that came through me. Vanessa Nygaard's now an assistant.
Wow.
She came to me that way. James came to me that way. Olaf Lang, Sandy Brondello's husband, came to me that way. James Lothran, who's behind the bench now with the New Orleans Pelicans, came to me that way. But San Antonio was great about that. And I knew I was confident that I could, and I did, you know, when James, you know, we hired him as an intern and they gave me the way to house him and get him some money and that type of thing. And that was a really powerful tool that I could see a young person like James, who our discussions were really good. I really enjoyed talking basketball, and I really enjoyed the man he was trying to be. And especially, you know, knowing that without going deeply, you know, he was going to be a good father. I knew that. He was going to be a good husband. I knew that, you know, and I also knew he was going to be a good coach. Well, man, you know, you can really put a lot of trust in people when you start developing those feelings, you know, that this is a solid man, a solid person, a solid coach, you know, doing it for the right reasons, and you just want to help them.
Val, before you go, I want to ask a follow-up question. I don't know if this is a rabbit hole that we want to go down, but were you conscious about the landscape of what was going on around you in terms of men of color or women in general or women of color? And is not that you had a hidden agenda, but is that just something that now we're pretty overtly allies with regards to people, and there are strength in numbers in a way now that's different. But were you saying to yourself, I have to do more in this space?
I mean, honestly, that really wasn't part of the filter.
Yeah, just good people and people with great values. It's that simple. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I'm cognizant of some of the hurdles women had to go through to get to certain things, and I'm cognizant of the struggles different people have had. It's not lost on me, but I wasn't motivated by that. I was motivated more by the character of the person, the talents of the person, and I didn't look and say, well, this is a male, this is a female. It wasn't that. I wanted a world where people could say, hey, this is somebody who really is good. And it didn't matter, you know, it didn't matter if it was a woman, for example, you know, in the position to be a head coach. You know, of course, you know, I'm aware they're a woman, but it was more the quality of what they could do and how they could do it. That's what always resonated to me. And so I think it led me to advocating for a lot of people in different situations. But the truth was, the reason that I was inspired was because of who they were, you know, and what they could do. And I wish the world looked at, and I feel sad when I don't see them get opportunities, because the world should just be better to understand who's good at certain things and who isn't. The world just should be better.
I mean, it's just counterintuitive. It just doesn't make sense if you just say it out loud. Val, go ahead. Speaking on this very topic, go ahead.
You mentioned that you could tell that Coach Wade was going to be a good coach. Could you tell that when you were coaching Becky Hammon and Dawn Staley that they were going to be great coaches one day?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. I had more trust in them than I had in me. If you really go back and study, and again, I know that's not a popular coaching statement, but I am very good at studying people and allowing trust to go where it's deserved. And yeah, Dawn, that was a pretty easy one. And I was early in my WNBA years with her, and then Becky, it was just amazing. I had tried to trade for Becky for several years, and then eventually it happened, got it done. But you can't be in Becky Hammond's presence and not realize that she can handle an awful lot of situations. And Dawn has the same thing. Those two are great examples of that. Sue has that, for example. Stewie has that. Jewel Lloyd, loved coaching her. I had 3 of those at Seattle. That's why we were pretty good. But Becky, I told Brittany Griner this year when we were just sitting talking one time. I probably learned more from players than any other resource in my career when I went into professional sports. I learned more from players. I don't know if they realized what they were teaching me at the time, but I did. As I look back, I had influences like Greg Popovich. I had influences, my peers. But probably the greatest influence were the players that I coached. They taught me, and I was aware. It wasn't like I was the coach and they were the player, and then they're supposed to listen to all that I say. If anything, it was probably the other way around. It was me learning from them. Now, there were times they had to do things that maybe they didn't agree with that I chose to do. But by and large, it was me aligning with people that I trusted.
Man, that's awesome. Did you have follow-up, Val?
Well, I guess that's maybe the definition of when they say he's a player's coach. When I hear people describe a coach, oh, she's a player's coach, he's a player's coach. So I can imagine the people who played for you probably have the same admiration and love that you have for them.
Well, I hope so. And that's an interesting, a player's coach, and I take it in a very positive way because I do believe in players. I just do. Now, I'm a little bit fussy over what players I think will work in my system. I have to be honest with you. People don't realize how much thought I give before the fact. Am I going to work well? Because there's different ways to be successful. And there are probably some players that I wouldn't be the best coach for, but
I was going to ask you that. Yeah, I was going to ask you that as a follow-up, not to cut you off, but do you like the direction that the game is going now with more isolation and counter moves and as opposed to team play, like Stanford, for example? No. Okay.
You mean, I think Stanford plays a team game.
That's what I'm saying. Like more like Stanford plays like, what Tara and Heidi do at UCSD, those types of things.
Oh, I like that tremendously. And I think that's why I've always gotten along so well with Stanford players and their staff, for example, Kate. And when I retired, one of the greatest compliments that was paid to me was Kate, who is Tarla's key assistant for all these years. She said to me, Coach, we always root for Dan Hughes. And it just made me feel good, that she would, any team Dan Hughes coached for, we root for. And that was about as nice as anything that was said to me, in regard to it. And I don't there's some basketball I'm watching, and I am a huge fan of NBA, college women, college men, high school. I'm a huge fan and appreciate it all and watch it every day. And I got 4 TVs in my basement and there's games all over the place.
Wow.
But I really don't like some of the basketball that I see sometimes. And I struggle when it's not, to me, it's the ultimate team game, the ultimate, because it's one ball and all that. And I love, and sometimes I will choose a game to put on the big screen. I got a 75-inch, I got like 219 inches, I got a 55 in the back. I will put the one that's got team play, whether it's men, women's, NBA, whatever, and I'll put it on the big screen. And maybe I'll catch the one on the 19-inch, what's going on down there. But that's kind of my world. And I really, I follow some NBA teams really closely because I know their coaches really well. And like Memphis has just won their 7th straight game.
Yeah.
I love what they're doing in Memphis. He's been a good friend, and I have the ability to really follow his team, for example. And they're all kind of prodigies. Charlotte, I follow big time. San Antonio, I follow big time. And they all kind of lead back to Greg Popovich, who, for a professional coach, I think does so much to bring about and you use Tara as an example, to bring about a team kind of look at professional basketball with all these gifted players. And these are offspring of Pop in a lot of ways. And I enjoy watching them play. And I do. I do watch them, and I do the same thing with college men and women.
Amazing. All right, let's get to the rapid fire. It's interesting you brought up Pop. People don't know where Pop came from. And the coaching tree from the University of San Diego and Hank Egan, Musselman, Pop, Mike Brown, Bernie Bickerstaff. I mean, nobody even knows where the University of San Diego is. They think it's a mistake when I'm supposed to be talking about San Diego State. And so where Pop came from is it's even more amazing, to be honest with you. Okay. Whose microphone sounds better, mine or Val's?
Well, I would have to say Val. But
really? I just got it yesterday.
Yes, that's why I asked that as a first.
I don't know. It's coming across kind of loud and clear, but I had to throw one to Val, because I
threw an alley-oop on the first
coached
pass.
her, and I would have thrown her a lot on the post-up. She would have got a lot of them, man, and she would have been motored down the floor to rim run, and we'd have been getting her the ball. So,
man, Val has some of the best footwork that I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, I've seen highlights. Yeah, her footwork's amazing. Too. Smart.
Always thinking the game well.
That hurt me though, because I would overthink the game and stop reacting.
I wish we could have played together, because I kind of get that. I have that in my makeup. And so I think I coach people well in situations to kind of give them priorities so that they play more instinctful.
Yes.
And that is one of the better things I did. And I had players that were, sometimes able to really focus and move from thing to thing. But I also think I had players who I needed to be instinctful. They were brilliant, but they could overthink of things. And I do that in my own life. So it's a work within my own world. But I think I coached those, and I don't mean to brag, but I think I coached those players well. I got them to a priority standpoint where they were instinctful, and they let the game happen to them, because there was such a beauty in their game. And they had done all the prior thinking. They'd done all the work before, they just needed to be in the moment.
Yeah.
And I was decent at helping people do that, because I think it's the same thing I deal with.
Interesting. Marlon Brando or Paul Newman?
Paul Newman.
Wow. You like his salad dressing?
Not a bit, but I love it. I love the Sting. That movie, I still play that.
Oh, God. It's awesome. Jerry Lewis or James Stewart?
Jerry Lewis. Watched the telethon every year. Every single year. It was a ritual for me, and I miss that we don't do that on Labor Day.
Absolutely. Boy, is he funny. God, some of his facial expressions. Bob Hope or Dick Clark?
Dick Clark. American Bandstand was huge to me.
Wow. Absolutely.
I watched it every time. I'm a big music guy.
Right.
And I think what's really interesting to me, I listen to a lot of podcasts lately, and one of the things that this is an old rocker, when when she talks to another old rocker, the question always is, how many times were you on American Bandstand? And then they talk about their experiences.
Right.
Cool. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Elizabeth Taylor or Marilyn Monroe?
Marilyn Monroe.
Interesting.
Fascinated. Elton John did a great tribute in Candle to the Wind to Marilyn Monroe. And
love that song. That's
just sparked me to know more about her. And then Joe DiMaggio in that era as well.
Oh.
I was a big baseball guy growing up.
Yeah, you played baseball and basketball in college, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good old D3 Muskegum. Sean Connery, or today we lost an icon, Sidney Poitier.
Two of my absolute favorites, but it has to be Sidney Poitier. Oh. I was almost going to post something today. My favorite movie, and the movie that impacted me the most in my life, was To Sir With Love, that he starred in. That spoke. My mom and dad took me to this little theater in Marietta, Ohio, and I went to it. And that movie had a lot to do with my inspiration, I think, to work with people. He was a teacher in a London suburb, but that's my favorite movie of all time. And my heart. And I matter of fact, I said to my wife, we're going to watch To Sir With Love this weekend. Just in honor of Sidney. I felt bad. We have a world he's not in. I thought he was unbelievable. But Sean Connery, we could spend hours on him too. That was a hard one there, but Sidney wins that one. So.
Absolutely. Okay. You've had a lot of celebrations on your wall at home that you've talked about. Which one's the most special there behind you besides the bobbleheads?
To be honest with you, the one thing I've had in my whole career is my first basketball team. It's over in the corner, Madison Plains High School.
Wow.
That to me, I'm 22 years old and I'm a head high school coach. And if that experience doesn't go well, I don't know if any of the rest of them happen. But that one, and I didn't know what I was doing. I really didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I had a good team. I had good young men. But that one probably, that's the one thing that has always been a part of my career. It's always sat on my wall. Probably that one.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Three Stooges or Abbott and Costello?
Abbott and Costello. I know that's not normal, but all my land, I loved Abbott and Costello.
Oh God, they were so great.
First.
Yeah, there you go.
I Love Lucy or the Honeymooners?
I Love Lucy.
Wow.
But for some reason, the Honeymooners I enjoyed, but I Love Lucy for whatever reason just has been a part of my landscape for all these years.
Absolutely. Sanford and Son or All in the Family?
Sanford and Son. I was just so on All in the Family. I love Sanford and Son.
Oh, me too.
Elizabeth. Yeah.
Food in Seattle or San Antonio?
Ooh, I could get in trouble with this one. But,
Val's listening.
I have to say Seattle.
Wow.
I'm not a huge Tex-Mex guy. And we were so fascinated, my wife and I, we were at a stage where our kids were raised, and my son was at the U.S. Air Force Academy, and my daughter was having her own family, and we were on our own. And I loved the experience we had in Seattle, discovering the food, and I'm a huge salmon. I eat salmon at least twice every week.
Wow.
There's no place in the world better for salmon than Seattle. We live downtown.
Okay.
And we had a condo that kind of overlooked the lake with Elliott, I believe, where the cruise ships come in. And there was a wonderful, and you probably know it, Val, and I'm sorry, I'm talking about senior moments. I can't think of the name of it, what the restaurant was, but it was a long, right near where we were at, and it's fabulous. And I never had salmon. I grew up not necessarily on either coast, right?
Right.
I had salmon for the first time in Seattle in 1984 when I went to the Final Four that year.
You're almost 30 years old at that point. Wow.
Yeah, I'd never had salmon. And it was a Final Four. I was a Division III coach and assistant coach. And Houston, Elijah Wan was playing Patrick Ewing.
Yep.
In Georgetown in that finals that year. And that's the first time I had salmon, and I thought it was a little slice of heaven. Just too good.
That's amazing.
That's how it felt when I had Chilean sea bass for the first time.
Oh, yeah. I love sea bass.
I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
We're going to get more of this.
Yeah, sea bass, amazing. How did Kobe's death affect you, Coach?
Immediately. I was on the road with USA Basketball. And I didn't know Kobe, but Kobe knew my players. Kobe knew Becky Hammond really well. He knew Jewel Lloyd really well. I'm sure he knew a lot of them.
Yeah.
In ways that, but the first thing I did was contact Jewel Lloyd and just say, "Are you're doing okay?" Because I knew how much he meant to her and the mentorship he had given her and her career. But I also remember with Becky, Kobe was one of the first people to really kind of turn the lights on Becky and say, "Hey, you need to really look at this player." You know, he made comments about enjoying watching her play and all that. And I had read stuff where Kobe had written about, he used to do some analysis of women's players of Stewie. And I thought he was incredibly insightful into Stewie. But I thought of Jewel right away. And that's I picked the phone up and called her and said, "You doing okay? This is just really difficult." And we were about to play Connecticut in an exhibition game with USA Basketball. That was I was in Hartford, Connecticut when all that went down.
Another moment, just like in the 60s, where you remember exactly where you were when it happened. For me, it was 9/11 and when Magic announced that he had HIV.
Yeah.
How good is Paige?
Very good. But I think, just being honest with you, where she's at, she is incredible.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of ground to be covered in the coming years. When you start talking about her as one of the greatest of all time, and comparing her with those people, there's still some ground to be covered, for her to reach those kind of moments and those kind of things. But as a basketball player and as a fan now, of which I am, I love watching her play. It's just pure joy.
She reminds me of Steph Curry a lot in terms of the style of play and what they brought to the table early. And you think that she can evolve into that kind of transformational player like Steph? Yeah.
But there, a lot of things have got to happen. Health's got to stay good.
Yeah.
In regard to it, and there's got to be that ability to endure. Things. But I enjoy watching her play as much as any young player that I could point to. But and I don't mean to demean her talent, but I just know there's still steps in this. In this thing, that she'll and probably will work through, and she'll be a generational player. I think she has those kinds of opportunities ahead of her.
All right, let's crank these last few out, Coach. Should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame?
No. And I'm a Ohio guy that likes it a lot, but no, I'm sorry
Interesting.
There's lots of things that I'm very forgiving about, but when you kind of go outside the rules in that way, it doesn't mean your life's over. But I think in some cases there are consequences to stepping outside those lines, whether it's a coach cheating for players or whether it's a situation like Pete. And I'm just not sure the Hall of Fame is where he should reside.
Interesting. Bob Nightingale was on the show, and he had interesting reasons as to why he thought he should be, but respectfully, appreciate that answer. Pedro or Greg Maddux? God, two guys that could paint the black like no other.
Yeah, probably Greg Maddux, but that we could flip it on that one.
Wayne Gretzky or Mario Lemieux?
Wayne Gretzky.
Okay, so usually I ask a different question but I know you don't like to answer questions a certain way. So of MJ, LeBron, Magic, or Larry, who surprised you the most?
MJ, LeBron, or what was that?
Magic or Larry. Did any of those four players surprise you more than any of the others in terms of what you thought they were going to do when it was all said and done?
Well, I had experiences with three of them.
Wow.
So probably the one that surprised me the most was Larry. When you look at his track, especially, kind of stepping away from and ending up at Indiana State. But Magic, when I was at Miami University, Magic was a freshman at Michigan State, and we were in the Sweet 16 together in Dayton. Wow. And I got to see Magic up. So that wasn't a big surprise to me. I'd never seen anybody quite like Magic. Michael Jordan, I used to go to camp and work in North Carolina. And the first time I went to camp there in the afternoon, their players would come in. I'm working basketball camp for Dean Smith, and the basketball players would come in and play pickup. And Michael's on the court. Now, I know who Michael is because it was after his freshman year. He'd made the shot to win the game and all that. But the ball bounces off a free throw situation. He goes up in the rafters. And I'm sitting there with Brad Daugherty, who high school coach, who later was coaching Brad Daugherty at the time. I'm that old. But Michael catches the ball and then takes it in his other hand and dunks it. Now, the guy that was checking him was Walter Davis. Now, Walter Davis is Hubert Davis's, they're related. I'm not exactly sure, but Walter Davis was a pro at that point, an Olympian and all those things. He did that over Walter Davis. So that didn't surprise me, in regard to it. And LeBron, that one, growing up in Ohio, coaching in Cleveland. Yeah. That one didn't surprise me because I was actually there when LeBron was drafted by the Cavaliers. Right. And that was my last year in Cleveland. And LeBron was a good follower of the WNBA. He used to come to our games as a 19-year-old guy in Cleveland. Matter of fact, my favorite story about LeBron was I used to dress in the Cavaliers coach's locker room. I had a locker in there, and that's where I dressed. And LeBron had worked out in the summer. We had a game that night. He's walking by and he said, "Hey, good luck, coach." And I said, "You coming to the game?" He goes, "Yeah, I want to come, but I haven't got tickets yet." And I go, "Well, hey, here's my family's away. My daughter's playing volleyball and such. It's a little box down by here. Here, you take these." So he took them, and I'm at the game, okay, and I kind of look back to see him in our box. Well, what had happened, he went in our box and all these fans started seeing him sitting there.
Oh, man.
And they lined up all the way up Gund Arena. It was called Gund Arena then. Right. And they had to move him. He couldn't even sit in our seats as a 19-year-old guy from St. Vincent. But he was that special. So I didn't know. I don't have a lot of stories about Larry Bird. So I'd probably say that was probably the most surprising.
What a great answer. Jack Nicklaus or Tiger Woods?
That's a really good one. Probably Jack Nicklaus, growing up in Ohio. And just having the knowledge and so many courses. I'm not a golfer, but I know we got like more Jack Nicklaus courses than you can imagine in Ohio.
Absolutely. Tom Brady or Joe Montana?
Tom Brady. Never seen anything like that in my life.
Yeah, and last pocket passer like that we'll ever see. So you've been an announcer for a long time. I'm sure you've learned a lot. We could talk about that on another day. But between Dick Vitale, who's going through his chemotherapy very publicly, and wishing him well on his journey again for the second time. So either Dick used to coach at the University of Detroit, by the way, when I was a kid. Bill Walton or Steve Lavin as an announcer.
Dick Vitale.
Oh man, classic.
And Dick, I don't know if younger people know how much he has. Somebody told me the other day, they said, name 5 people who had more influence on college basketball than Dick Vitale. And they're right. He had a huge influence on him. And my favorite story about Dick Vitale was he came to one of our games one night. We were playing New York, the Liberty, in Madison Square Garden in the playoffs. And he's at the game anyway. The game's over. And he comes, I think we'd won that night, but he comes in the locker room and introduces himself. He said, "Listen, Dan, your team played really good." He said, "I got to tell you the truth. I was rooting for the Liberty. Richie Adubato is a friend of mine. Becky Hammond was probably on that team, for example." And he said, I just want to be up straight with you. I was rooting for the Liberty, but just wanted to say your team played good." But Vitale's meant an awful lot to the sport of basketball in general, but specifically college basketball.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, 2 more questions, unless Val has one at the end. So your dinner table, I know your wife and your late dad would be at that table, but if you could pick 5 people, past or present, dead or alive, not anyone you know, who would be at your dinner table?
Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney would be there. That's a really good. Jesus Christ would be.
Popular answer. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's a popular one.
Great answer. It's just popular.
Yeah. And, if we're going to have Paul McCartney, we might as well have John Lennon join us. I think that would make a lot of things.
Who would be the first woman at your table?
First woman at my table. I'd like to see my mom again. I lost her. I think that would be a great one. Would love to do that, but Pat Summitt, I had a nice relationship with her. I knew her, but you're talking about people that I could bring back. And
of course.
Kay Yao. I have this wonderful picture of Kay Yao, Pat, and me in Cleveland. They played each other, and we did a clinic together. And wow, a lot of those people would be just great to bring to the dinner table for that.
So you're doing a lot of traveling and speaking, and do you want to finish with that? And Val, do you have any questions before we give the floor to him?
I just wanted to know when the book was coming out.
Yes, that was the same question I had. You don't have to be the writer, Coach. You can get a ghostwriter.
Oh, we would definitely have to have a ghostwriter. Let's be real serious.
Perfectly clear.
I'm not a great writer. It's interesting. People have asked me about that, and it's the same thing with social media. I was never on social media, never.
Yeah, you started LinkedIn in 2021.
Oh, really?
and I did it because my daughter said to me, I asked my daughter, I said, sometimes as a coach, it's not the easiest place to live. Yeah. But she gave me a great answer. She said, "Yeah, there's some things about social media, but Dad, you could do some good." And I thought, that's true of a lot of stuff in life, and I think the same thing with a book, because my book would probably not, I'm a storyteller, but I would hope the stories lead to a greater good than what Dan Hughes did in 2018. But
Coach, you helped people be the best versions of themselves, and that's probably the greatest compliment that somebody can give you. And as we're approaching the 50th anniversary of Title IX this year, your involvement in the women's game has got to go down as very impactful on so many levels. And I think if it comes from that standpoint, it would resonate with so many people.
Well, and people ask me, what do you want your legacy to be? And you've just described it. That championships are great. I love all that. Trust me, I get the beauty of that. That's timeless. But the fact that, and you said it eloquently, and I hope that is true, that I brought out the best in people. that's the legacy that I'd like people to have. And I feel fortunate, like when I look around the WNBA, and about there's pretty strong ties to about half the head coaches in the league. And you can go into college, and it's not because of what I necessarily, it's about those people. But I do think that if your life's about helping people be the best versions of themselves, that's a life well led, you know?
So, well, man, on that note, that is so powerful and so eloquent and so true. Coach, we can't thank you enough for spending an hour and a half with us. Your time's so valuable. You've done 1 million of these interviews. You do speaking engagements all over the world, in person and on Zoom. And man, best of luck to your first grade basketball.
I got a game tomorrow at 8. Okay.
God, please post some highlights of that game. God, I can't wait to see that.
I'll make sure the world knows the results, but thank you. It's just been very entertaining. And Val, it's always a pleasure to cross your paths, but I've appreciated the thought you all put into this, and wish you all the best in 2022. Okay.
Thanks, Coach.
All right. Thanks, Coach. Much love and respect.
Take care.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Well, that was as powerful of a podcast as we've ever done, Val.
That was good. Good job.
I appreciate it.
Great questions. Oh, I'm so happy my dog decides to bark now.
Oh, man. That was great. Oh, I mean, we could have talked. That was as fast as the 90 minutes as we've ever had. I mean, we could have talked about 1 million things. You know, he brought up Pop and at Summit. I know those people listening to a previous podcast with him on, were so influential in his life. Oh, I can't get enough of that stuff. I just love learning from successful people.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. I always saw that.
Just a nice guy. Yeah.
When I played against him, he just gave off a certain vibe.
And some people resonate with people that yell, but that's just not who you were. And so that's probably why he resonated with you, is, he would have helped you with the analytical side and then the technical side too. It would have been a perfect combination. Well, it's nice that he said that, and those kind of sentiments are cool when you share a similar vibration with somebody.
Yeah, for sure. And I told you that was the one and only fight I ever got with him.
And you didn't even like her.
I didn't even like her. Like, what am I doing?
Oh, that's classic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed sharing space with the amazing Val Whiting and myself, Hootie Hoot, host and producer of the Sports Deli podcast, where everyone deserves a seat at the table. For more information about the Sports Deli podcast, check us out online at thesportsdelipodcast.com. And don't forget, you can always shoot us an email with any comments or questions at thesportsdeli@gmail.com. And please check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Mike Hootner. For Dr. J and Coach K, I'm Hootie Hoot. Remember, Black Lives Matter. Stop the Asian hate. Stop the bullying. And please contact your local and state politicians for any group or person being marginalized in any way, shape, or form. And remember, you're not alone. You can always call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-TALK. That's 800-273-8255. And at the end, we have a couple of funny outtakes for you. Until next time, remember, it takes a village. Much love. Peace.
I just got a new microphone.
Ooh. Oh, let's go. We got to see a TikTok on this. What's up, Coach?
Not much. How are you? Hear me all right?
We hear you, but we can't see you.
Hang on.
What time do you normally get up?
Well, I'm supposed to be 6:30.
Wow.
But now I've been sleeping in.
Hey.
What about you?
I mean, it depends if I have my daughter.
So did you and I meet during the pandemic?
Oh, yeah.
So that's been a quick 2 years.
Crazy. Yeah, because I think after you and I you were on the show, you invited me to Clubhouse in January. So it had to have been the 4 or 5 months prior to that.
Wow. I did get on yesterday by accident, Twitter Spaces.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah, Spaces is fine. It's just different. It's just different. I was going on Wisdom for a minute, but I don't have my iPhone anymore.
What's Wisdom?
It's like you have one-on-ones with people. It's very interesting.
One-on-ones.
Yeah, like you just start your show and then you just bring people up and you can choose the amount of time they're allowed to be on stage with you. It's interesting. I know.
I know Val.
Yeah, we're friends on Facebook as well, and
I know Val well.
Yeah, Val and I developed a relationship after she came on the show, and she's been my co-host a number of times, and she was just a co-host again with women, the amazing and heroic, courageous, and pioneer women of the WBL that were just on this past week. So just love having her as my co-host, and she's starting her own podcast soon also. So I'm excited to do anything I can to help her with that endeavor.
Good. Val, you still in the Pacific Northwest?
I am still here, and it's still raining.
I know. Some things don't change.